Forgive the late video, but I failed to make one yesterday, so my person's having me do another one today to make up for it. I delayed for a while, but it's I'm about to go to sleep, so better get this out the way. Today's video will be on compromise. Now, a lot of people tend to support compromise, and I can understand why. The base idea is pretty good, you know? You can't agree on something with someone, so you say, alright, well, we can't both have it our ways, so I'll give you this, you give me that. Quid pro quo. For those who don't know much Latin, this for that. Compromise functions this way. If you want something, I give you this, you give me that. So if I want, say, this pencil, and yes, this is a pencil, then you give me a pen. And so we agree, and he just walks away, not completely getting everything we want, but still getting something. It's like a balance. Yes, this balance is poorly drawn. I tend to suck when it comes to actually drawing things. But it's the whole idea of it. You and I give up something in exchange. We both even each other out roughly. Not exactly. Depending on the situation, one side can get more than the other. That's just how things work. But as a whole, things roughly balance out. So where's the problem with this? The issue comes when force is introduced into the equation. Because if I can, say, pull out a weapon, let's imagine this right here is a spear, and I use it to start making demands. Well, suddenly, this changes, doesn't it? Suddenly, I have the superior position. Because if I'm willing to use violence, and you are not, guess who wins? Because it isn't you. In fact, using said weapon, I could very easily get you nothing. You could receive nothing from our deal and end up completely out of everything when force is introduced. Now, this is important because it means every single agreement has some level of force to deal with. It could be blatant force, like, say, when countries are negotiating with their militaries. Take the recent situation with Iran, Israel, and the United States. All three of them have militaries. All three of them can exert power through force. And so, there's always some aspect of military power in the negotiations. When the U.S. bombs nuclear facilities as a show of force, they are effectively saying, if you keep going, we can just bomb you to oblivion. Iran bombs our military bases. It's saying, you are not safe, we can hurt you too. Israel attacking Iranian sites, same deal. Same deal in the reverse with Iran attacking Israel. That's the thing. When it comes down to it, so long as there's an element of force involved, there will always be some level of influence by force. That makes compromise already a difficult prospect in and of itself. But there's another thing that makes compromise very, very difficult, and that's morality. I'll draw yin and yang since it's a relatively understood symbol for morality. Ignore how bad it is, but yeah, more or less. See, when it comes to morals, you can't really compromise. You can do a live and let live sort of thing, which is somewhat of a compromise, but the issue is it doesn't really work as a moral system. For example, slavery. Can you really do a live and let live situation with slavery? If your neighbor owns slaves, will you just say, "Oh yeah, I mean, I disagree with that morally, but I'll just let him do it"? Nah, that's ridiculous. Slavery is just wrong. You shouldn't need to debate that. If someone's engaging in slavery, they should be stopped. Now, of course, what classifies as slavery varies depending on the person, because everyone essentially uses it as their way of saying bad. It's work I don't like, essentially, in the modern way. So, for example, a socialist will say, all labor in a capitalist system is slavery because you have to work to live. Well, in that case, all work is slavery no matter what, because you always have to work to live. That's what scarcity is. He who shall not work shall not eat. You know? That, which was in the Constitution of the Soviet Union. But, skipping over that, let's set the basic definition for slavery as owning the rights to someone else's body as property. Now, as humans, we've maintained the right to self-ownership just inherently. That's part of our natural rights. What that means is you own yourself. You are property owned by yourself, your mind. Slavery says, actually, you, your body, is owned by someone else who can dictate what you're allowed to do. Now, would anyone with a moral framework beyond, I'm just gonna let things go on because I don't want to start a fight, agree that that is horrible and something needs to be done about that? Yes, I would hope, at least. And so, you can't really compromise that. You can't have a whole half slave, half free situation, or, we're gonna allow you to own slaves, but you gotta stop paying for them. Nah. Such doesn't work with slavery. You either gotta go all in on abolition, or accept that people can be owned by each other, which I will never accept. Now, paying for the end of slavery in a gradual process, I can sort of accept, in the sense of it's at least gonna get done. Like, that is the bare minimum. It's gonna get done, so at least there's that. And because it's gradual, it allows an introduction to the workforce that just sudden manumission doesn't allow. Because if it's sudden, well, it's sudden. It happens. Like that snap. It may not be well coordinated with everything else, but it's gonna happen. And that's what we see in the actual Reconstruction years is the labor market goes through a freaking roller coaster due to the introduction of African Americans into American society. They now are working for wages, so what ends up happening is it creates a whole situation where people are now competing for jobs that normally they didn't have to compete for before, because these new laborers bring further tensions. Add to that the already racist beliefs of a lot of white Southerners at the time due to the entrenchment of the slave system, and you have a very real situation where no matter what, it's not going to end well if you're a black person trying to get a job at that time in the U.S. But, regardless, I think we can all agree slavery needs to be abolished completely. And so, you cannot compromise there. A compromise does not work in such a situation. Sometimes you gotta pull an extreme and say, yes, I will stand by this under any and all circumstances. There will be no compromise. There's another issue with compromise. Progress. Now one might ask, why is progress a threat to compromise? It's because it ruins the idea of it. The whole point of a compromise is we all walk away with something, right? This for that, quid pro quo. Now, progress takes that away. Because let's say an ideology is progressive. And when I say progressive here, I mean working continually towards a goal. So, for example, liberal progress is working towards the imagined liberal future, what they consider what they consider to be the perfect liberal world. Socialism, it's the same concept. If you're dealing with a traditionalist who imagines a great past with all the old laws of, say, the 1880s, let's just go there, then they're going to be continually pushing towards that. With a progressive worldview, things do not stop. There is no end point. So, if I make a deal, let's say, with a progressive, I'll allow you to do some gun regulation, which I really don't care for. In exchange, you loosen regulations elsewhere. Let's say that's the deal. Now, for a time this may work. The bill is passed through the House and the Senate, gets put into law, and we both win something. Alright, well now they come back again, and they say, hey, we're gonna need more gun regulation. Because it wasn't enough, and it's common sense, right, to keep passing these laws that have shown to do nothing, but, it makes people feel better, so it's common sense, gotta pass it. Do you think that compromise is gonna last? Do you think I'm gonna trust that when I make a deal with you next, you're actually going to abide by that agreement? No. You've already shown you're not trustworthy. And that's the thing. Progress is the enemy of compromise because the whole point of a compromise is to preserve a status quo. This for that, balancing the scales. Progress wants things to be inherently unbalanced towards whatever the dream is of the person at that time. So if you're a liberal wanting liberal progress, then what's going to happen is no matter what, you're going to keep pushing for your liberal worldview no matter what. No exceptions. Until the world is entirely liberal. And so, naturally from that, the scale must be loaded in favor of the liberal worldview, the liberal ideals. There can be no negotiating with that. There can be none. Because their worldview inherently pushes a continual charge towards that end goal. As such, there can be no compromise. No compromise can exist with progress because it will just push through and leave any progress in the dust. Remember when safe, legal, and rare was the argument for abortion rights in the United States? I may not have been born, but I have heard of it. I learned of it. That was the thing Clinton said. Alright, we're going to allow abortion, but it's going to be safe, it's going to be legal, and it's going to be rare. How would that last one hold up? Not well, if memory serves. In fact, abortion actually spiked after Clinton, and there were news stories later advocating for federal funding towards abortion and making it accessible for all, which keyword means federally paid for and therefore free to those who get it, meaning an increase in supply, therefore increase in use, and thus demand for the action. So, safe, legal, and rare, what was that? Oh yeah, utter garbage. What about gun regulation? It's only going to be a bit, you're not going to feel that much. Still going. As a matter of fact, in some countries, it went so far that Britain is now banning knives because they ran out of guns to regulate and ban. Fantastic. There can be no compromise in this situation. If I compromise in such a situation, I am essentially giving up something that they will take by force if I don't, and crush me. Well, if they crush me, that is. Now, if I win, my ideas are preserved. But if I give up ground willingly, then they're just going to entrench. And entrench, and entrench, and entrench, and eventually it's going to be impossible to get them out of that position. It's like Social Security. I could make 10 arguments for abolishing it. Doesn't matter, people are still going to say, we need our Social Security, don't get rid of it, we've had it for this long, blah, da, 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 da. People, it doesn't matter if it's efficient, if they get used to something and it doesn't immediately hurt them, they tend to support it. Because they support the status quo. And so whatever that status quo is, that's what they support. Slight modifications to the left or right depending on circumstance. That is generally the position of the moderates. And it can be a real headache. For me, and for most others. But it also leads to an interesting, almost middle ground fallacy where they think, if we just got the two sides to come together, make a good big compromise, and then pass it, we'd all be good. This middle ground fallacy approach of just, if we just hobble together all of the laws that they suggest, we'll eventually end up with something good. No. These things don't work together. Low taxes does not work together with a large welfare state. And neither does a large welfare state work well with low taxes. Plain and simply, you cannot compromise, because their ideas don't work together. And one might say, well, maybe they could compromise on one thing for another that do work together, like, as I mentioned, the regulation example. Well, small issue with that. They're not interested. Flatly. And I don't blame them for not being so. Why would they? Why would you be interested in working with people that you know would gladly set you up the river the first chance they got if they believed it was in their best interest? And more than that, if it's based on moral reasons, like say AOC likes to frame it, well then they're not going to compromise with you. They're going to take advantage as soon as you move the goalpost to a further position in their favor. If they're progressive, like Bernie Sanders, they're going to keep pushing and pushing and pushing until they get exactly what they want. What about the diehard war Republicans? Do you think they're going to compromise when they get the guns? No. Think Putin's going to compromise when he has the nukes? No. They're not. They don't care. In the end, when it comes to compromise, it only works in very specific situations where both sides are not even, but have something the other side wants and can offer. The moment one of these things gets involved, force, morality, progress, there can be no compromise. Compromise is a niche thing. It's not a majority thing. So let it be used when necessary, and let it be abandoned when not. Otherwise, we're just wasting our time.